Hey guys, how's it going? Hope you're doing well. My name is Crown, and today I'm going to read you some very interesting stories that I hope that you're gonna love. And now, without further ado, let's go!
I used to be a professional mixed martial arts fighter. Yeah, you heard that right. It was exhilarating, to say the least. I spent years training, competing, and pushing my body to its limits. The discipline, the mental toughness, the ability to read people and situations, all of that helped shape me into the strong person I am today. When my daughter came into my life, everything changed. Being a mom brought a new sense of purpose and joy that I had never known before. She's such a bright, lively, and loving little girl. We have a special bond that words can't do justice to. Over time, we've faced our fair share of challenges. My daughter is autistic, which has presented its own unique set of hurdles for us. But let me tell you, this girl is a superhero in her own right. She has a way of looking at the world that is truly magical. Simple things like riding her bike at the park can make her day absolutely perfect. My encounter with the menace called Karen begins with us arriving at the park one day with my daughter just being overjoyed. She was giggling and hopping around like a little bunny. I got her bike out and she hopped on, pedaling away with joy. Watching her happiness always filled my heart with warmth. After a while, I noticed a woman giving us the evil eye from a distance. I've heard stories about Karens, but I never thought I'd actually meet one. She had the haircut and everything. Short, choppy, and demanding to speak to managers everywhere she went, I'm sure. Karen and her bratty sidekick started making their way toward my daughter. I could sense trouble brewing, but I didn't want to make any assumptions. When they approached, I greeted them with a warm smile, hoping for the best. Karen approached me and told me that her little boy had been wanting to ride a bike for ages, and she thought he'd really enjoyed trying my daughter's bike. Her tone was demanding rather than asking politely. Now, I'm all for sharing, but something about Karen's aura didn't sit right with me. Besides, my daughter was having the time of her life, and I didn't want to disrupt her. So I politely declined, explaining that my daughter was having her moment right now, and maybe another time would work better. Well, let me tell you, that didn't go over well with Karen. She turned her wrathful gaze toward my daughter and demanded that I let her son ride that bike right now. Her voice was loud and aggressive, making it clear she wasn't taking no for an answer. My daughter got a bit confused and uncomfortable by the sudden demand. Her bike was her comfort zone, and she didn't understand why this lady was behaving this way. I gently told Karen that I understood her son may want to ride, but my kid needed some space and asked her to please give us some room. Karen, however, wasn't about to take no for an answer. She grabbed her brat and tried to force him onto the bike, ignoring my daughter's visible discomfort. That's when I stepped in. My mama bear instincts kicked in. I raised my voice and told her to listen up, that I had said no and she needed to leave my daughter alone and find something else for her son to do. I made it clear that she wasn't going to push us around. Karen huffed and surprisingly walked away, dragging her kid behind her. Shoo! Crisis averted, right? Wrong. The drama was just beginning. About 15 minutes later, I was chatting with a friendly mom I'd met at the park earlier when we saw Karen charging back towards us like a raging bull. I could feel the tension rise in my chest. I knew she was trouble. Before I could react, she pushed my daughter off her bike, snatched it, and bolted away, with her kid trailing behind her. I was shocked and enraged when I saw my daughter on the ground in distress with her eyes filling up with tears while looking at me with utter confusion. And all I could think of was not letting this horrible human being get away with assaulting my autistic kid. After I made sure my daughter was okay for a second, I gave her a quick hug, left her with the friendly mom from earlier, and without a second thought, I sprinted after Karen, determined to catch up to that whale of a woman and teach her a lesson or two. Now here's where my old life came in handy. Years of mixed martial arts training had given me speed, agility, and reflexes that most people don't have. Even though I'd retired from professional fighting, my body still remembered every technique. When I caught up to Karen, adrenaline pumping through my veins, I knew I had to stop her. In one swift motion, I delivered a masterful flying kick to her back. She flew forward like a sack of potatoes, crashing face first into the ground. Her brat was too busy trying to ride the bike that just fell in front of him to notice his entitled mother's fate. I could hear gasps from the bystanders. To be honest, even I surprised myself a little. It had been years since I'd used those skills, but muscle memory is a powerful thing. When Karen was moaning in pain, the police arrived on the scene. Someone must have called them. They took statements from the witnesses, and it was pretty clear who the guilty party was. Karen was soon in handcuffs, wailing and protesting. The officer approached me and asked if I wanted to press charges against the woman who had attacked my daughter and stolen her property. I took a deep breath and told him that yes, I absolutely wanted to press charges. I explained that this woman had attacked my daughter and stolen her bike, and I needed her punished for what she had done. Karen was hauled away, and her boy was taken into the care of a family member who had arrived shortly after the chaos. My little kiddo got her bike back, and I held her close, thankful that she was safe. When the crowd began to disperse, the friendly mom I had met earlier came up to me with what looked to be some admiration in her eyes. She told me I was amazing and that she had no idea I could pull off a move like that. I laughed a bit and explained that it wasn't something that came up in everyday conversation, but I used to be a fighter back in the day, and it seemed that old skills die hard. She smiled and told me that my daughter was lucky to have such a fierce and caring mom. Her words warmed my heart, and from that day on we became fast friends. Our little group of moms at the park grew, and my daughter had a fantastic time with her new friends. Of course, we kept an eye out for any potential Karens out there, but luckily, they were few and far between. After the incident at the park, the police conducted a thorough investigation, and the truth about Karen started to unravel. It turned out that her encounter with me and my daughter wasn't an isolated incident. This wasn't her first time offending someone's child the way she did with mine. She had a history of causing trouble in the neighborhood, and it went far beyond just being an entitled and pushy person. Numerous witnesses came forward, sharing their own experiences with Karen's aggressive behavior. There were accounts of her harassing other parents and children, causing disturbances at public places, and even instances of her getting physical with people who dared to say no to her. When the testimonies piled up, it became evident that Karen's sense of entitlement had been escalating over time, and with a mounting list of charges against her, Karen found herself in a situation she couldn't charm her way out of. The court recognized the seriousness of her offenses and her utter lack of remorse. Finally, after an intense legal battle, the verdict was delivered. Karen was found guilty on multiple charges, including assault, theft, and child abuse. The judge sentenced her to prison, among other things. Her pattern of behavior had finally caught up with her, and she would have plenty of time to think about her actions behind bars. I'm a 26-year-old and I grew up in a small town where everyone knew everyone, and my parents taught me to be respectful and kind to others. When I moved to the city for college, I kept that same attitude, even when dealing with difficult people. I guess that's part of why it took me so long to stand up to what happened next. I met my husband through a mutual friend at a coffee shop downtown. He was sitting alone sketching in a notebook, and something about his quiet concentration drew me in. We started talking about art, then books, then everything else. He was gentle, funny, and had this way of making me feel like I was the only person in the room. We dated for 2 years before he proposed, and I thought I knew everything about his family. His dad seemed nice enough, his sister was sweet, but his mom always seemed a bit distant whenever I was around. I figured she was just protective of her son. When we got engaged, I was so excited to officially become part of his family. I had these dreams about having a close relationship with his mother, maybe going shopping together or having coffee dates. My own mom lived across the country, so I was looking forward to having that maternal figure nearby. The first red flag should have been her reaction to our engagement news. We went to their house for Sunday dinner, and my fiancé was practically bouncing with excitement. He stood up at the table and announced that we were getting married. Instead of joy or congratulations, she just stared at us for what felt like forever. Then she told us we were too young and needed to think more carefully about such a big decision. She got up and went to the kitchen, leaving us sitting there in awkward silence. Planning the wedding became a nightmare. She insisted we invite her entire book club, her yoga class, and people from her old job that my fiance hadn't seen in years. When we explained that we wanted a small, intimate ceremony with just close family and friends, she completely lost it. She yelled that this was her son's wedding, and she wanted everyone to see how perfect he is. She said we couldn't just exclude people who'd been important to their family. I tried to explain that we understood, but we were paying for this ourselves and wanted something more personal. She shot back that if we were so worried about money, she was sure they could work something out, but she wouldn't have people thinking they were having some cheap, thrown together ceremony. My fiance tried to mediate, but she had this way of making him feel guilty whenever he didn't side with her completely. Eventually, we compromised and invited about half the people she wanted, which still doubled our guest list. The wedding day itself was a disaster. She showed up in a dress that was clearly meant to upstage me. It was this elaborate white gown with sequins and beading that probably cost more than our entire wedding budget. When people complimented her on it, she'd tell them how she wanted to look her best for her son's special day, as if I wasn't even there. During the ceremony, she sobbed loudly in the front row. Not the happy tears you'd expect from a mother watching her son get married, but these dramatic, attention-grabbing sobs that had everyone turning to look at her instead of us. When the officiant asked if anyone objected to the marriage, she actually cleared her throat like she was going to say something. My heart stopped for a second before she just blew her nose loudly. At the reception, she cornered me by the dessert table while I was trying to enjoy a quiet moment. She told me that I needed to understand that she would always be the number one woman in his life. She explained that a mother's love is different from a wife's love. I nervously replied that of course I would never try to replace that relationship and that I was just happy to be joining the family. She said good because some wives try to come between a mother and her son, and that never ends well for anyone. I left nervously, not sure how to respond to what felt like a threat disguised as a conversation. After the wedding, things got worse. She would show up at our apartment without calling first, usually when my husband was at work. She'd let herself in with the spare key he'd given her for emergencies and start rearranging things. I'd come home to find my kitchen completely reorganized, with all my spices alphabetized and my dishes moved to different cabinets. Once, I found her in our bedroom folding my underwear and sorting it by color. When I asked her what she was doing, she said she was just trying to help me get more organized. The breaking point came about 6 months after we got married. We'd saved up enough to buy a small house in a quiet neighborhood, and we were so excited to have our own space. We planned a housewarming party and invited both our families and some close friends. I spent days preparing, making sure everything was perfect. I cooked all my husband's favorite foods and decorated with fresh flowers from the garden. Karen arrived early and immediately started commenting on everything. She didn't like how I'd arranged the furniture, thought the paint colors were too bold, and made sure to mention how much nicer her house was at every opportunity. But I was determined to have a good evening, so I just smiled and tried to redirect the conversation. During dinner, she excused herself to use the bathroom. She was gone for a long time, and when she came back, she had this satisfied smirk on her face. She announced that she'd noticed our bathroom could use some personality, and that she'd brought a few decorations from home. She hoped we didn't mind. Before I could respond, she'd already hung up this hideous painting of a sad clown above our toilet. It was genuinely disturbing, like something you'd see in a horror movie. I was too shocked to say anything at first. Then she said she thought we could use something else too, and placed a plastic flower arrangement on our kitchen counter that looked like it came from a gas station. It was bright pink and yellow, completely clashing with our neutral color scheme. My husband looked mortified, but I could see he didn't know how to handle the situation without causing a scene in front of our guests. I told her that was very thoughtful, but our decorating style was a bit more minimalist, and we preferred to keep things simple. She replied that she could see we were one of those modern couples who think they're too good for a little color in their lives. The whole room went quiet. Our friends were staring at their plates, clearly uncomfortable. I explained that it wasn't about being too good for anything, and that we just wanted our home to reflect our personal taste. She huffed and said that if we insisted on being so dull, she supposed there was nothing she could do about it. I felt my face getting hot, but I didn't want to ruin the evening for everyone else. I told her we appreciated her thoughts, but we'd prefer to choose our own decorations. She made comments for the rest of the evening about how some people don't appreciate generosity. After everyone left, my husband and I had our first real fight about his mother's behavior. The final straw came 3 months later. My husband and I both worked long hours, so we cherished our quiet evenings at home together. We'd been looking forward to a relaxing weekend when we got back from running errands on Saturday afternoon. When we walked in the door, something felt off. There was a strong smell of potpourri, and everything looked too clean. We could hear someone moving around in the kitchen, and my heart sank. We crept toward the kitchen and found Karen standing there, going through our cabinets and examining our dishes like she was conducting an inspection. I asked her what she was doing there. She cheerfully told us she'd decided to come stay with us for a while. She explained that she'd been feeling lonely lately and thought we could use some guidance from someone with more life experience. My husband looked like he was going to be sick. He told her that she couldn't just move in without asking us first. She brushed off his concerns and said not to be silly, that we'd love having her there. She mentioned that she'd already set up her things in our bedroom because it was more convenient for her there. She'd taken over our bedroom, our sanctuary, without even asking. I told her this was our home and that she couldn't just decide to live here. I explained that we needed our privacy and space. She dismissed my concerns and said not to be so dramatic. She insisted that we were still so young and inexperienced and that we needed someone to show us how to properly run a household. My husband finally found his voice and told her that we never agreed to this and that she needed to leave immediately. She said fine, but warned us not to come crying to her when our marriage falls apart without proper guidance. She gathered her things with a lot of dramatic sighing and comments about ungrateful children. My husband walked her to the door while I stood in the kitchen, shaking with anger and relief. After she left, we sat down and had the most serious conversation of our marriage. We both agreed that her behavior had crossed every possible line, and we couldn't continue to let her treat us this way. We decided to cut contact with her completely. The next day, we changed all the locks and blocked her number. We told our friends and family about our decision and asked them not to share information about us with her. It wasn't easy, especially for my husband, who struggled with guilt about cutting off his mother. But when weeks turned into months, we both realized how much lighter we felt. We could come home and actually relax. We could make decisions about our life without worrying about her opinion or interference. Our marriage got stronger because we were finally able to focus on each other instead of managing her drama. I'm an international student who moved to the US for college. It was a huge adjustment, new country, new culture, completely different way of life. I had just turned 18 and was trying to figure out everything on my own. The only family I had nearby was my cousin who lived in Dallas with his wife and their 2 kids. I hadn't seen him in years before starting college, but he was kind enough to help me get settled with things like getting a US phone number, buying bedding, and picking up school supplies. My cousin was always the helpful type, the kind of person who would go out of his way to make sure you were okay. His wife, on the other hand, was different. She seemed nice enough on the surface, but there was something about her that rubbed me the wrong way. She had this entitled attitude where she expected people to just go along with whatever she wanted without question. When Thanksgiving break came around, my cousin invited me to spend it with their family in Dallas. Since staying in the empty dorms sounded pretty depressing, I accepted. It was actually a great time. I got to meet his 2 kids, an 8-year-old son and a daughter. We spent the whole week catching up, talking about how our lives had changed, and just enjoying family time. The son was a sweet kid, very energetic and affectionate, though I didn't know him well since this was basically our first real meeting. After the break ended, I went back to college to focus on finals. That's when things got weird. A few weeks later, I got a text from my cousin's wife asking for what she called a small favor. She wanted me to take their 8-year-old son back to the Caribbean with me during winter break because his godmother wanted to see him. I was immediately uncomfortable with the idea. I told her that I couldn't do that because I didn't know when my exams would be finished. That wasn't entirely true. I knew exactly when my exams ended. But I said it because I was hoping she'd drop the subject or figure out another solution. The whole thing felt wrong to me. I talked to my mom about it, and she agreed that I shouldn't get involved in something like this. She texted back saying that it would mean so much to his godmother who hadn't seen him in years. I replied that I understood but really couldn't commit to that right now with everything going on. Weeks passed, and I finished my finals. I was at the airport just chilling and waiting for my flight back home for winter break. I was actually looking forward to it, a chance to relax after a stressful semester. Then my cousin called me. He asked if I was doing something for his wife, something about taking their son somewhere. I told him no and explained that I had told her I couldn't do it. I said I had explained that I didn't know when my exams would be finished and that I wasn't comfortable with the arrangement. He thanked me and said he appreciated me being honest about it. I hung up feeling relieved that he understood. I thought maybe his wife had finally accepted my decision and moved on. When I was walking to my gate, I saw her. My cousin's wife was standing there with their son, who was holding a suitcase and a carry-on bag. My cousin was nowhere to be seen. My heart started racing when I realized what was happening. I asked her what she was doing there. She acted like she was so glad she found me and said she had brought him like we discussed. She claimed his godmother was so excited to see him. I told her we never discussed anything and that I had said no. She launched into this whole sob story about how the godmother had been waiting to see him and how disappointed she would be if he didn't come. The kid was just standing there looking confused. And then he came over and hugged my leg. The little boy asked if we were going on a plane together. My heart broke a little because he was so innocent in all of this, but I knew I had to stay firm. Karen pointed out that he was already excited and mentioned that the ticket was already bought, so I might as well take him. I told her no. I said that if she wanted to do this, she should have planned a family trip together. I made it clear that she couldn't just dump her kid on me at the airport. She complained that she had already spent the money on the ticket and that it was too late to change plans now. She had bought a ticket for her son without confirming with me first, then showed up at the airport expecting me to just go along with it. I was 18 years old, barely knew this child, and she wanted me to take him to another country without any proper planning or documentation. I told her again that I said no and that I wasn't taking him. I said this was crazy. She accused me of being selfish and claimed it was just a simple favor for family. I shot back that family doesn't ambush each other at airports. I said if this was so important, she should have planned it properly with her husband. The boarding announcements were starting and I knew I had to make a decision. Part of me felt bad for the kid, but I knew taking him would be wrong on so many levels. I didn't know his godmother had no idea what the custody situation was, and taking a minor across international borders without proper arrangements could have gotten me in serious trouble. I apologized but said I wasn't doing this. I told her she needed to take him home. She kept arguing about the ticket being already bought and how I couldn't just waste money like that. I told her that wasn't my problem and that she should have confirmed with me before buying anything. I walked away and got on my flight. I could hear her still arguing behind me, but I didn't look back. My hands were shaking when I found my seat, but I knew I had made the right choice. When I got home, I told my family what happened. They were all proud of me for standing my ground. Turns out they had never liked her either and thought she was manipulative. My mom was especially relieved that I hadn't gotten involved in what could have been a legal nightmare. The real kicker came later. During the pandemic, my cousin and his wife got divorced. According to my cousin, she had been going behind his back on a lot of things, including this airport incident. He had no idea she had planned to send their son with me until he called me that day. She had been making arrangements and spending money without discussing it with him first. And now we have reached the end of today's stories. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.